This is the second to last class for the Impactful Innovators. And you've heard from a lot of different entrepreneurs this semester. You've heard their journeys and the things that they've done and accomplished. Few have been as close to you, I think, in age, in terms of kind of sitting in your seat just a few years ago. Timmy was one of our incredible entrepreneurs who went through so many of our different programs at Submarino, from the Change World Challenge multiple times to the business model competition, won our business model competition, then went on to win the state business plan competition. And I think that really launched him into what has now been VARA Safety. And so it's a real pleasure to welcome Timmy back to share a little bit about his story. He's had a tremendous amount of initial success with the launch of their product and has been learning just a ton along the way. So welcome, Timmy. Thanks for coming back, and turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Jason. Hi, my name's Timmy O, and I started in RPI in 2013 as a mechanical engineering and design major. I'm originally from the LA area, down about an hour in a city called Anaheim. And this is my first venture, and I started it while a freshman in college at the age of 17. So what kicked off everything off was the Change the World Challenge at RPI, where you could just submit an idea and win a cash prize if selected. I submitted 10 ideas. The judges felt bad for me, and I was selected as one of the 10 winners that semester. The idea that the judges selected was a gun safety device. The image on the right is the actual concept I submitted back then. And this concept targeted a market of over 393 million firearms in the US. The problem I had wanted to solve was the injuries and casualties caused by unauthorized firearm access. The crazy thing is right now, 50% of firearms are left loaded and unsecured. And in a nation where 1 of 3 households has a gun, was a significant market where a solution could make an important impact. So shortly after, Kelly and Jason encouraged me to grow the idea and go get market feedback. And they introduced me to a free online article called Talking to Humans, which made a huge difference in how I conducted my market research. So the truth was that initial concept that won the competition was a complete failure. And I learned that the hard way when I tried to get feedback on AR15.com, which is one of the largest online gun forums. The post I put up there went viral, but in a very bad way, where I got completely shredded by the community. And it was a good learning point though, because that's when I had to pivot and start over. So that summer, I went and did research at the Los Angeles Police Department Firearm and Tactics Division, where I learned about the true pain points in gun safety and storage. Specifically, what I discovered was that the traditional gun safety devices, or safes, make immediate access and security mutually exclusive by restricting access and their outdated technology. So in short, gun owners don't believe that they can access a locked firearm reliably or in time to defend themselves or their family. In 2016, I won the $100,000 New York State business plan competition, which gave me enough funding to pursue this full time. But what was even more important at that event was that was the beginning of the team. So Christine Tate was one of the judges in the competition as an East Coast angel investor who's highly involved in the upstate community. And she joined VARA that year as a co-founder who brought a huge amount of experience in executive management, operations, and financials. And that year I went back home to California to start prototyping. And with a hardware startup, there's one saying that you hear pretty often, and that's hardware is hard. That's mainly because the process isn't exactly as simple as a software where it's that cycle of build, launch, and learn. However, there is a process that can be used successfully and is explained more in depth on Bolt.io's blog called the Illustrated Guide to Product Development, and that's something that I followed pretty closely. Essentially, it breaks down the process into four main components: ideation, design, engineering, and validation. One mistake I made back then was that I did waste a lot of money hiring electrical engineering firms in the beginning. And in hindsight, adding capable engineers to the team early on would have been a much smarter play that would have saved money and built more value. In 2018, we raised our seed round that enabled us the resources to add on more hires and grow the team. This funding was used to finalize product development, start manufacturing, and launch the product. By this time, the final design of the product had taken shape, which was Reach, a biometric handgun lock that unlocks only for authorized users as they naturally grab the firearm. Austin, shown here on the left, is our exceptional CTO, and he brought his experience in product development and manufacturing to make this really happen. In 2019, we launched our product through a pre-order campaign, and we ramped that over a course of a month and sold about 400 units on launch. Our first manufacturing batch was 500 units, so overall it was pretty great results. But I remember at the time I was super upset because we didn't sell like thousands of units on the first day. But in hindsight, that's okay because it gave us time to figure out production and shipping. So to give you a quick timeline, we closed the pre-orders in June, promised delivery by August, was late about a month and delivered in mid-September. But 4 to 5 months from pre-order to shipping on the first product is an insanely amazing accomplishment, and that's all due to our incredible team. So now we're continuing to grow the company as fast as we can. We're just at the beginning of this, so it's pretty exciting to share our current progress. VARA Safety is now a 10-member team, 7 full-time employees and 3 part-time, and we're actually based here in Troy, New York. In the last year and a half since launch, we've sold over 3,000 units and made over $1 million in revenue, while also launching a second generation of our product. We're currently raising a $3 million Series A round led by an established impact investor in LA. With this funding, we'll be able to drive significant growth by adding on high volume distribution channels in retail and government, as well as launching additional products. It's still very early in our growth stage, so there's a lot to look forward to. And now if you have any questions or comments, I'm happy to answer them.
I'll open it now first to student questions, and then I can jump if people need more time to think about things.
Yeah, what didn't people like about the first concept? Like what did you get ripped for?
Yep, so let me go back to that picture real quick. So the first concept was, first of all, entirely designed from like my dorm room where I didn't have any market research, any customer feedback. I just decided, oh, I just want a way for a gun to be locked so it can't shoot a live round when a child's playing with it. When this got put on AR15.com, all the comments were, this is an incredibly stupid idea because of how it works. Like, you don't want to be putting anything down the barrel. So there was a lot of like naive assumptions I had made with the product initially because I didn't know anything. And that's what I started getting ripped apart for.
Tomas?
Yes. What made you decide to work on a product for this instead of something else?
The biggest thing, I guess, was finding a problem that I actually cared about. I grew up with firearms from a young age. My uncle is actually in the LAPD, which helped me get that research. Due to that, this was something that I had grown up knowing that a lot of people, especially children, get access to loaded firearms. And what happens is usually super tragic and something that should not be happening in this day and age. So finding the problems that you really cared about, I think was the starting point for me.
Tyree?
Yes, I'm curious, was it intimidating, like initially being such a young entrepreneur? I kind of saw in the first picture in such a kind of space where you see older people. Was that intimidating, or did you kind of just fall in line with it through your time at RPI?
Honestly, everything was a very exciting experience because everything was so new. All the events that you get to go to, the people that you meet, and the places you traveled to was very exciting. There definitely have been times where I felt intimidated by that age gap, but for the most part, everyone in the startup community is super welcoming and supportive. So for the most part, it wasn't an issue.
I'll just add an additional question to that. You had to get used to speaking with larger groups as part of this and generally presenting. Is that always something you've gone to, or is this something that you've had to learn as part of the journey?
Honestly, even today when I'm presenting, I always do get nervous. It's just something that the more you practice, the more confident you'll be, where you can kind of do it through muscle memory. So I remember when I pitched the 2016 business plan competition, I literally had memorized it into a script. So when I went up on stage, I like blacked out, but I was still able to do the pitch flawlessly because it was all muscle memory at that point.
Actually, your
Yeah.
voice kind of faltered when you did that pitch, and it was faltered
Yeah.
right at the right moment because it made you sound emotional when you were telling a story about an individual who lost their life because of the accidental discharge. So it worked in your favor.
Yeah, Christine always brings that up as well too.
Abigail?
Yeah, so what are some beneficial lessons or any advice that you've gained along the way?
Is there anything specific in regards to that you would like to know? Because there's been a lot of learning lessons along the way.
How about
Um,
related to building a team?
Building a team is probably one of the hardest parts. I think it's a matter of finding the right people who believe in the mission and vision, first of all, willing to commit all the way. Because more often than not, I think in the beginning you assume that, or you hope that will be kind of like an early exit, that type of stuff. But it ends up being a much longer journey, and a lot of VCs and other entrepreneurs say this, but it's like a roller coaster ride. So you kind of want to find someone in the seat next to you that you think you're okay with being on the roller coaster ride for like a good 5+ years. Um, in terms of finding those people, it's a matter of like networking. So getting out to all the different events there are. And I know Kelly and Jason did a really great job of connecting me to all of those in the very beginning. So I took advantage of that. And that's kind of how I met Christine as well as a lot of the other team members.
So you had to make this really tough call at some point of saying, hey, do I want to pursue my degree at RPI, or do I want to pursue this entrepreneurial dream? Could you take us through what making that decision was like?
Yeah, that's probably one of the most hardest decisions I've ever made, since I never started this intending to be an entrepreneur or to have my own business. So at the time, I had a really, really great internship that I had like worked super hard to get into. That was paying very well. And then at the time, there was a competition that required me to fly out, and I had to prepare for that. So at that point, I had to decide, am I going to continue my education, continue this internship, or fully commit? And around that time, I was stressed out with trying to deal with both stuff. So I just pulled the trigger, no pun intended, and went fully on board with VARA.
Gotcha. Katrina?
But that was stressful, yeah.
What did you learn at RPI that you used while making and designing for this project? Either from a development, like using your whatever you learned as a mechie, or even from a business perspective.
I think honestly, it's more of the community and network that affected me the greatest, where there's all the peers and the instructors really helped guide me in areas that I was not sure of. So whenever I had a question, they would guide me to the right resources or help along the way. So I think that was the biggest impact at RPI.
You've gone through this process of trying to find manufacturing partners, trying to do manufacturing in-house. What have you learned as part of that other product entrepreneurs might want to consider and take forward?
So this is an area where I kind of had a cheat sheet, and it kind of goes back to the team, where I was able to hire Austin, and he's had a pretty extensive experience as a engineer himself in production and product development manufacturing. So I did have the concept, but having someone who actually had been through the process before and knew how to manufacture product, that is what made everything possible. So a lot of where we are here today with manufacturing is due to Austin's incredible work. So it's kind of a hard answer, but I'll say if you don't know something, if you're not an expert in it, it's best to find a team member who is, because they'll be able to get that done. So there's only so much you can do as one person.
Gotcha. And Miles, you want to ask your question?
Yeah, did you ever take any venture capitalist investments or anything?
Luckily, the initial stage of the company where a lot of other people have to take like pre-seed or run a friends and family round, I didn't have to do because it was funded by these competitions. But after that, we did have to raise a seed round, which we did, and then we started a Series A round. We have definitely taken on venture capital.
What do you see the next 10 years of building this company looking like? Is this something where you're hoping it comes to a quick partnership with a larger company? Do you see that this is something that you're likely to try to grow individually as a company and build out distribution and so forth?
So I think that's a really great question because we're at this point now where it's pretty much a big shift. That initial goal we had back in 2016 was to launch a product that would make safety a lot better and more effective. And for the most part, we've accomplished that in regards to launching a successful product. But now with the development and the team, we've realized there's a much bigger opportunity in this market to make a effective change in kind of how the whole ecosystem of gun safety works. So that's kind of what we're trying to do. We've brought on some pretty incredible mentors who helped us think bigger. That's part of the reason why we're looking to raise additional funding so that we can really pursue a high level of growth. And then along the way, we have kept potential acquisition partners pretty close at hand. So for like gun companies, gun safe companies. So once we reach like a critical point, we can easily interact with them to see if there's an exit opportunity together.
Clint, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, so Timmy, if you can, like look back at, when you were a student or when you were first starting off, and what are the differences like between the Timmy of old and the Timmy now, as far as like your leadership skills and abilities, your managerial skills and abilities, and even just you as a person? Can you like sort of contrast all those things that make you up as a business person back then and then compared to now?
I guess the biggest thing is all the different ways I had to grow in regards to leadership. In the beginning, when it's just a couple people, it's more like a small team project. But once you kind of break into like that around like 10 employees type of stuff, it becomes a whole different level in terms of management, responsibilities, and kind of like the pressure that you're under. So I think growing up to kind of fill those shoes was an important part. In the beginning, you do hear a lot of the stories where initial founders aren't exactly like the best fit to be the CEOs to kind of lead the company. So I guess that had been in my mind back then. But as you progress, I think there's like a certain point where you kind of have to decide if you want to be responsible for the growth and development of the company or not. And that was another one of the big hard decisions to make in the startup journey. But I'm glad I did. And that was with the support of the team and Christine, to be honest.
Kelly, do you have a question?
Early on, Tim, you being a mechanical engineer and being in the DIS major, you were very much into designing and you were very much into your creating CAD files, and that was your passion. So what did you have to do and what kind of mindset did you have to switch into the CEO position and stop designing?
The more the company grows, the more your bandwidth starts to get stretched. So it's just kind of a matter of letting go of those and letting people who honestly do it so much more better than I can ever do. So yeah, I think the whole product design phase, that passion honestly had to step aside pretty early on as soon as we started hiring more engineers, because there was the whole other aspect of being a leader in the company to fill.
So you're from California. You decided to stick around upstate New York. This is where some of the team that you got formed with, but is that the primary reason, or is there other things that you've seen in this region that have been helpful for you?
The region is where I think had the most support in regards to a ecosystem where a company like mine fit in. It might have been a different story if I was like a software developing some type of application. But in regards to a hardware-oriented company, the East Coast is actually pretty significantly growing. You have other companies such as Density.io up near Syracuse. So they're like a huge multi-million-dollar backed VC company that does like hardware software business, but they actually moved their manufacturing up here. So that kind of goes to show how this area is very viable.
Emmanuel?
So I was wondering, what's your current work-life balance like, and how has it changed over time? Being so young, I imagine that you still want to have time to have fun and do, other interesting things.
So the term work-life balance doesn't really exist too much for me because I guess part of the thing was doing the whole thing of startup was in it itself really fun. So I didn't mind putting like the long hours in because I really enjoyed it and it was exciting. Definitely there are times where you start to feel like you're burning out. So it's good to find good ways to do stuff. So I'm very active. Like I like rock climbing, like surfing and all that type of stuff. So I do keep that part balanced. But in regards to work, like the whole executive team, to be honest, myself, Christine and Austin, we work nearly around the clock, like 24 hours. On the weekends, we're messaging each other. So it's kind of like a full-time grind.
When you look at these different parts of the business, so you've got a hardware part, you've got a software part. What has been the most challenging thing to crack, or is it really getting the system together? What has been really the hard part, or has it been challenges that are more related to business issues of distribution, manufacturing, things like that?
I would say it's definitely a matter of everything. So for example, like on the mechanical side, for example, when we had to make the molds and all that type of stuff, if there was an issue, we essentially had to scrap the initial mold, which is always pretty scary because you have like thousands of dollars invested into that. So you're basically saying goodbye to that portion. We had to make sure in our initial beta testing, we found a couple software bugs, which was extremely scary because of the sensitivity of our market to this in relation to firearms. But we make sure that was thoroughly tested. We found out the solutions to that. So honestly, it's a lot of like little fires everywhere, but being able to tackle them effectively one at a time. Same thing for the business end as well.
Let's give Timmy a hand.
Yay!
And I feel like we're going to hear lots more stories over the years as this company continues to develop. And we really appreciate you taking the time today to join us. Actually, we have one last question. If you were a freshman here at RPI today, just go back to the Timmy of not too long ago. What do you think would be motivating you? Is it the same problem? Is there anything in the current environment that you think would catch your eye?
I think one thing that was apply to a lot more competitions than I did. I did apply to like a significant amount, but I think at that early stage, the more traction you could prove through these competitions, because they'll open up new avenues of networks, would have been pretty incredible. At a certain point, I started to not focus on competitions, and I think if I had held on a little bit longer, that would have kind of propelled me at a much faster rate.